For more, let's go to Washington. Michael Pregent is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute think tank. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Hey, thanks, François. Good to be back.
First off, your reaction there to what you just heard from Andrew Hillier in Aleppo, that there's a feeling of euphoria where he is, but there's fighting not very far off.
Right. What I found striking about his report, or the one that resonated with me the most, was the Syrians that are willing to wait to see what happens, because that's the position we have right now. Jilani, a former al-Qaeda leader, changed the name of the Nusra Front to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in order to avoid sanctions. I mean, he leads this organization, and he's saying everything right, and that's what's most concerning, that an al-Qaeda leader, a jihadist, is saying that he's going to protect the rights of people that don't believe in his religion, that don't follow it the way he wants it followed. So I think a lot of people are worried about how much a former al-Qaeda, in quotations, leader has changed.
Now, Aleppo is in the northwest of Syria. In the northeast, we were reporting Wednesday on the fact that it was members of this HTS rebel alliance that had taken over Deir el-Zor from Kurdish-led forces, who they themselves had come in just a week before. It's still unclear at this point whether or not there was a firefight there or whether it was a handover. But in any case, how does it unfold now between the SDF, the Kurdish forces, and the rest of this rebel alliance?
Deir el-Zor is a traditionally Sunni enclave belonging to Sunni Arabs that live in Syria, and it should be handed back to them. But that doesn't mean it's handed back to an ISIS-linked group or an al-Qaeda-linked group. So I wouldn't be surprised if Deir el-Zor was handed back in a way. The main concern there is what the Iranian militias were able to do at Deir el-Zor. They were able to push in Afghan Shia fighters, the Fatah-Mayun, into Deir el-Zor and take over this area and exit Sunnis from Syria that went into Turkey and on to Europe. So it should be handed back to Sunni Arabs, but those Sunni Arabs should not be ISIS fighters or Jabhat al-Nusra, former Jabhat al-Nusra members, such as Jilani's group.
And that brings us to the role of the United States. The U.S., which has a military presence in Syria, it's been essentially working with that Kurdish-led SDF coalition. One of their main aims has always been to keep ISIS in check. There were U.S. bombings earlier this week. Let's listen to the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, in Jordan before going to Turkey for what we can imagine will be perhaps some frank discussions, the Turks who are squarely against the SDF. Let's listen.
And part of that also has to be ensuring that ISIS doesn't rear its ugly head again. And critical to making sure that doesn't happen is the so-called SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, that we've been supporting. They've been critical in making sure that ISIS is kept at bay. Critical also to guarding the detention facilities where thousands of foreign terrorist fighters have been detained for years, keeping them off of the battlefield, keeping them away from rejoining ISIS. That's a critical mission, and it's one that we have to see be pursued going forward.
How does the U.S. play this, Michael Pregent, especially at a time when we've heard Turkey's president, who's been crowing this week that he's the winner in all of this?
Right. So it's how does the U.S. administration until January 20th handle this, and what does it leave to the Trump administration? The Biden administration and Antony Blinken are thinking about lifting the terrorist designation of Jilani's group and also ending the sanctions, which would mean, much like the Afghanistan model, that the U.S. would be providing billions of dollars to the Taliban in Afghanistan. They'd be doing the same thing to this former al-Qaeda leader's group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. When it comes to ISIS fighters, it has been the SDF that has been holding these ISIS fighters in these prisons. It has been Erdogan who's been targeting the SDF and the YPG, the U.S.-backed force in the north. So that's very concerning. What about regional spillover? What are the Iraqi militias going to do in Iraq? They've talked about going into Syria, but it's too late now. They can't do a lot. But what do they do when they hear words from Jelani like we're ready to help Hamas with its fight against Israel? And then telling Tehran, don't worry about any of your Shia concerns here, the Shia minority or the Alawite minority.
Right. So, but how does Antony Blinken handle Recep Tayyip Erdogan?
Well, I mean, he can handle Erdogan. Erdogan has seen Antony Blinken fail in Vienna with the JCPOA, fail with Afghanistan. He can't handle Erdogan. Erdogan's not worried about him. It's more important what Trump is saying now to Erdogan about what he's going to do with these rebel groups. Some of these rebel groups that Turkey's backing are former ISIS fighters, are former al-Nusra Front guys. So they have, members on both groups that are now fighting each other, backed by nation states like Turkey, and also Qatar is funding a lot of this. So it's what Trump says to Qatar and what Trump says to Turkey. That is the most relevant thing. Antony Blinken can't do a lot right now, and I don't expect any leader to take any threat from the Biden administration over the next month seriously.
The United States, which is due to wind down its military presence in Syria. Donald Trump, somebody who doesn't like foreign campaigns. Is that a good thing that it's winding down?
Well, it's when I talk to people that are looking at Trump's foreign policy in the future, it's going to have to be tied to what's best for America, right? Staying out of wars. But it's also based on leverage, sanctions, designations, and kinetic targeting of specific leaders, much like what the Israelis have done with Hamas, with Hezbollah, and with Iraqi militias, and also kinetic targets inside of Iran. That's another way to keep Americans out of these prolonged wars. So what Trump is concerned about in northern Syria is the gas and oil, is control of that. We do not want that to fall into the hands of a jihadi group, so much like ISIS was able to get their hands on it during the ISIS campaign. So it'll be interesting to see what Trump does. A lot of us try to push Trump to stay in northern Syria to protect the Kurds because of what Erdogan was going to do. And we've seen Erdogan, target the SDF, target the YPG, and that is against U.S. interests, but we haven't seen a strong position from the Biden administration, and I hope we see at least a leveraged one from the Trump administration.
One final question for you. We had some bitter words the other day from Iran's supreme leader, his first public reaction since the fall of Assad. And there was this shot across the bow against Turkey. Will it stay at that?
Well, Iran is becoming more and more isolated. And I should say the Islamic Republic of Iran, they've lost Hezbollah, they've lost Hamas, they've now lost Bashar al-Assad Syria. And they do feel that the noose, in quotations, is tightening around Tehran. Erdogan's not worried about what the supreme leader is saying. Erdogan actually believes that he has more say in the Arab world than the supreme leader does at this point. So we do want conflict between Turkey and Iran, at least rhetoric. We do want that distrust, because we've seen them get closer and closer together under the last 4 years. So it would be good to see that separation start taking place.
And also, I got to ask you, because in this Time magazine interview, Donald Trump, very critical of U.S. support for Ukraine. He at the same time, when it came to the Middle East, was more ambivalent. Is he going to be an isolationist when it comes to that region?
Well, I think it's not going to be the commitment of U.S. troops anywhere. It's going to be intelligence, kinetic targeting of designated terrorists, increased sanctions, maximum pressure, not only on Tehran, but maximum pressure on other leaders that are causing these wars. It's going to be a leveraged position when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. It's going to be a deal offered to Putin. If you do this, you get this. I don't like that.
And if you don't?
I don't think Putin should have any victory in Ukraine. I just don't know at this point. We're going to have to see what's being offered. He's promised to end 2 wars before he even comes into office. So he's already talking to those leaders. I don't know that he's going to be effective doing that. I don't think you can give Iran a deal where they basically off-ramp from all of their militias and stop their spread of terrorism. And I don't think you can give Putin a deal that ends the war when it just basically gives him a victory letting him hold on to 2 regions in Ukraine, and then just wait for the next permissive environment under a Democrat president or under the next Republican administration. We have very strategic enemies, Francois.
Michael Pregent, many thanks for speaking with us from Washington.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.